o'clock on Monday, June 6th. And we are meeting here in San Marcos High School. This is a meeting of the San Marcos CISD Board of Trustees. I'm going to establish quorum. I see Dr.
Mr. Shanks is the only person I can hear.
Sorry? She can't hear me.
Yeah.
I can't hear anybody else.
Can we turn on the audio feed?
Now I hear Ann. Hi.
Hi, everybody. Okay, wait. Great. We just called this meeting to order at 6 o'clock in San Marcos High School. This is a meeting of the San Marcos CISD Board of Trustees. We have all members present. And our first order of business is the certificate of election to candidates elected on May 7th, 2022, election to serve on the Board of Trustees. And that will be items 2, 3, and 4. Filing statement, officer by elected candidates on May 7, 2022, election to serve on the Board of Trustees, and the administration of the oath of office to elected candidates on May 7, 2022, election to serve on the San Marcos CISD Board of Trustees.
So, hello everyone. We have Allison, feel free to come on up, take a picture. Allison works with me, and she's been charged with taking a picture because my wife couldn't be here. She, of course, she loves Biscantu, and she said, Allison, take a picture so you can't be shy about it because then I'll get in trouble. So I serve as the Hays County Judge, and it is a privilege and an honor to swear in this magnificent contribution to our community. I know you all agree because she literally walked on, is how I call it, unopposed, because she's been so magnificent for so many years to our community. So if you will please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
Okay.
I, Clementine Cantu Kasky,
I, Clementine Cantu Kasky,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the duties of
that I will faithfully execute the duties of
the office of San Marcos School Board Member, District 5,
the office of San Marcos School District, District 5
of the state of Texas,
of the state of Texas,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and of this state.
and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
I love it, and I congratulate you. Now I just got to sign it. Let me get your chair. Truly an honor for me. I asked her if I could swear her in. I said, Clem, allow me the privilege. So let me just sign this real quick, and I'll get out of your hair. That one too.
Thank you, Judge Becerra.
Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day.
Now we're ready to move on to our agenda preparation for June 20th, 2022, our regular scheduled meeting. Agenda.
Let's do closed session.
Everybody okay with doing closed session?
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's go ahead then instead go into closed session as authorized by section 51.071 and 551.074 of the Texas Education Code. Consultation with legal counsel regarding voluntary resignation agreement of Amber Owens. Consultation with legal counsel regarding non-renewal of David Schacter's term contract, and discussion regarding proposed termination of classroom teachers' term contract.
Trustee Shanks and Trustee Salmi, I think y'all provided a link for the closed session link, so we're gonna go set y'all up over there.
Thank you.
7:28. We're going to take in open session, we're going to take the 3 items discussed in executive session. Mr. Superintendent, you have, Dr. Superintendent, do you have some recommendations for us?
Yes, for item 8A, I recommend that the Board of Trustees rescind the action taken on April 19, 2022 regarding the approval of Ms. Amber Owens' proposed non-renewal of the term contract and approve the voluntary resignation and release agreement executed by the district and Ms. Owens.
I so move.
Second?
Motion from Ms. Halsey, second from Ms. Viapando. All in favor, raise your hands. 7-0. Further recommendations?
Yes, for item 8B, I recommend that the Board of Trustees non-renew the term contract of classroom teacher David Schacter for the reasons discussed in closed session and in accordance with section 21.208 of the Education Code, and authorize the superintendent to notify Mr. Schacter in writing on behalf of the Board of Trustees.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll move.
Motion by Ms. Viapando. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Second from Dr. Salmi. All in favor, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, 0 opposed. A further recommendation for item C?
Item 8C, I recommend to the school board to propose the termination of Amado Chapa for good cause as discussed in closed session, and authorize me as the superintendent of the schools to send the required notice.
I move that we authorize the superintendent as discussed in closed session.
Dr. Salmi makes the motion, and Mr. Viapando, I'm sorry, Mr. Arredondo, looking right at you. Mr. Arredondo seconds. All in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7-0. Thank you very much. We're going to go back on the agenda now and look at our agenda preparation for June 20th, regular scheduled meeting.
Madam President, we will start with item 5, the election of school board officers for the offices of A, President, B, Vice President, and C, Secretary. Item 6, public hearing to discuss the proposed tax rate for 2022, 2023. Item 7, public hearing to discuss the proposed budget for 2022, 2023. Item 8, superintendent's report. Item 9, reports and information items. We will have item 9A, an academic update. Item 9B, an operations update, will include a safety presentation by Mr. Doug Wozniak. Item 9C, an ESSER 3 update by Mr. Doyle.
Dr. Superintendent, will the academic update include the test scores to date for the?
Yes.
That'll have all the star scores? Yeah, thank you.
Could we also add to your academic update how we're doing with our scheduling process at the high school, please?
Item 10A, approval of consent agenda items. 10A, approval of the minutes of the regular scheduled board meeting on April 19, 2022, and special call board meeting on May 2nd, 2022. Item 10B, consider resolution acknowledging the review and approval of investment policy and strategy. Item 11, items for action. Item 11A, discussion and possible action of a revision to the board operating procedures to ensure transparency to the public on district expenditures and equity and access to the board decision-making process. Item 11B, consider approval of 2022-2023 board meeting calendar. Item 11C, consider approval of TASB delegate and an alternate TASB delegate. Item 11D, consider approval of awarded contracts for professional development, speaker consultants, trainers, and related services and materials. That'd be from Mr. Doyle. Item 11E, consider approval of purchasing cooperative, interlocal purchasing agreements, and state contract lists for 2022, 2023. That'll be Mr. Sandoval, Mr. Doyle also. Item 11F, consider approval of the budget for 2022, 2023. Item 11G, consider approval of contract with Excel Energy Group for the installation of LED lighting throughout SMCISD campuses.
Says lightning.
Yeah, I don't think we want lightning. But item 11H, consider approval of contract with Enviromatic Systems for the installation of controls on the HVAC system at De Zavala Elementary School. Item 11I, consider the approval of a contract with Longhorn Bus Sales for the purchase of 6 buses.
Can I interrupt and ask a clarifying question, please, on those items?
Yes, ma'am.
Are those all continuing to use bond funds from the 2017 bond? Those sound like they were on the list that was approved. Am I correct in that?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Item 11J, discussion and possible action regarding the optional flexible school day program for the 2022-2023 school year at San Marcos High School. Ms. Presley will present an option for criteria for half-day or an alternate schedule for students who meet certain criteria, but she'll have more information regarding that. It'll be in the board book also. Item 11K, item 11K, discussion and possible action regarding health class requirement for graduation.
Yes, I would like us to discuss re-implementing a requirement for the health class. The second item, I can explain this. The second one, I'm not sure if there's now an option available to us in terms of teaching like an abstinence plus. Is that, I think Dr. Salmi, there was some conference that you attended. There was some question about, is there another option for a sex ed program than what we're currently teaching? Is that correct?
So there are curricula that are options and there's TEKs that have been added. But it is all still under the abstinence plus umbrella. And I know that the curriculum that the SHAC presented to us is still within that umbrella.
Sure, you're making that one K.
But it's not in the health class. I think that that's all included in the biology classes. So this would be just a change up. Yeah.
Right. So I guess it came up that there might be additional lessons that we could be teaching in the abstinence plus curriculum that we're not currently teaching. And I wondered if we might get information on that and have that discussion if we wanted to reintroduce the lessons that we're not currently teaching.
Yes.
So that we're teaching the full curriculum that is available to us underneath the abstinence plus. And then also having a health requirement in addition to that. Having a health class, so. That's not part of it. Correct. It used to be the old health class in which this curriculum was also taught, not just in the biology classes, but then the abstinence plus curriculum was taught specifically inside the health class, which covered a broad range of issues relating to a student's health. And so there's a discussion about reintroducing that because I think that we've had many conversations about how students have missed some of that. Some of that is social emotional that we've integrated into other areas, but specifically like looking at social emotional, looking at nutrition, at abstinence plus, et cetera, that full health curriculum that now we're relying on students to get it sort of in an umbrella, but also in various other places, but we don't have one designated place in the curriculum for that or a requirement any longer. So that's what I'd like us to discuss on that.
So are we placing that under K, both abstinence and health class discussion together or separate?
I guess they could be together since there's not really, I misunderstood that there was another option for us in terms of the curriculum. I'm happy to have that as one conversation.
Okay. So
And I
that,
think I will review the documents I got from that meeting, Ms. Halsey. I think that I'm speaking correctly, that it is all under the umbrella of abstinence plus. I don't think there is any additional, but I think you're also correct that there are lessons that are not being taught because of the limited time that's allotted for that curriculum.
Great, thank you. And the other item that I wanted to have on the June meeting was a review of the stipends and consideration of doing an increased stipend for teachers who have obtained masters or PhDs.
That would be
Currently
item
we-
L.
okay,
Item 11L. That's how I have it.
great.
And then item 11M, we consider approval of budget amendments.
So under 11L, could I also request that we include the mechanism through which teachers and staff are made aware of the stipends that they are eligible for, just to have a review of that process so that we can ensure that it is an objective process and equally that equity is given across the district for all teachers, not subject to specific recommendations.
What's the process now? HR receives information when they finish their master's, like over the summer, then they bring credentials to you and transcript or something to verify it.
We receive the transcript and then we attach it to their table, and it's equally dispersed throughout the year for stipends.
For both masters and PhD. Depending on who turns in their paperwork, equally. Okay.
President Cantu had one other request for the superintendent, that in the academic update, that we also receive an update on the new bell schedule. I know that that was sent out to parents and students before the end of the school year, but if we could just have an update on that as a board and sort of an explanation of why and how and what that'll look like next year, that'd be great.
For the high school or for
I think it was.
just in-
I think it was everything was altered a little bit.
So would that come under
was
our
K-12, I
academic
think.
report, or are you going to put that as a separate item?
We're just going to make it one big happy academic report.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't think we need. There's no action. We just need to be updated and understand how it works and why we're doing it, because I've gotten questions about it. So.
Anyone else want to add? Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu. Thank you, Ms. Cantu. I don't have anything to add, but if my colleagues will return to the first page of the draft agenda, I had a question for staff on the discussion of proposed tax rate and budget. I know historically we've had, what is it, Escamilla and Pontnick or Tijerina show up and talk about our debt service rate and lowering it or keeping it the same and kind of future bond capacity. Do we know if, is that gentleman going to be here for that?
We don't have them scheduled to be here. We could reach out to them and have them come over. They did, we're going to talk about that here in a minute.
Okay.
They did lay off the 3-year INS rate and will be lower for next year. But we can have them come.
Yeah, I would, if we could invite Mr. Tijerina, and I guess if we're going to talk about this later, great. I just wanted to put a little asterisk that when we exit agenda preparation, I don't want that to like close the book, that we can't go back and say, hey, invite Mr. Tijerina, because I do have a couple of questions. I know, I'm just curious about the impact of, obviously, the increase in property valuations, what that's going to do to our INS rate, and the potential or possibility of future bond programs and passage of propositions with no tax rate increase, et cetera, et cetera. I think you know where I'm going with that. Perfect. So that's that. In the operations update, Mr. Sandoval, can we get an update on the supplemental bond program projects, like where we are? Are they out for bid, or is work happening at certain schools already? I'm just curious, and I think, for the public's benefit, reprioritizing those leftover bond funds and communicating with the public, like we're using that money to improve the schools and do things that we weren't able to accomplish with the first bond would be great. And then individually, I'm just curious where the 17 bond is, as far as closeout of some of these final projects and things like that across the district. I don't know, are we done with the 2017 bond? We're not, right? Yeah, there's still some outstanding stuff.
We're still working on it.
Cool, awesome. And then the last thing, as I look through this, in regards to the purchasing cooperatives and the awarding of contracts, individually, if possible, if you can provide in the board book a listing of those professional development services, speakers, consultants, trainers, and related services and materials. I'm assuming it's not just like one. I'm assuming it's like several for the year, and that's what you're asking so that y'all can start paying those out. I'm just curious. I'd be interested in seeing that. And then I had a question, and we can have this conversation at the regular meeting. The purchasing cooperative, are there local vendors in that cooperative? Is it easy to be a part of that cooperative? Like if I was at San Marcos High School and I wanted to order shirts for whatever, like do I have like a menu of local vendors that I can use, or?
Yes, we have a variety of local vendors on a variety of co-ops that we're members of.
Is there a way to see that list? If I said like, can you list every local vendor that's in the co-ops?
We'd have to go through, and it depends on the co-op. Some of them are easier to maneuver through, some of them we account for, but like Bible weekend, we have an entire spreadsheet that you can control, test, and find whatever vendor sells that to supply.
Okay, and obviously I don't want to start you on like a whole excursion of having to control F through everything. I'm just curious, I know I've heard anecdotal stuff across the district of where different organizations or departments, in particular the high school, because I think there's so many weird little outlier groups that buy stuff throughout the year, have tried to find local options, and I just want to make sure that, if possible, that as much local revenue and taxes are being spent locally. And then in regards to Ms. Halsey's requests, I'm curious, Dr. Cardona, as we potentially discuss requiring high school health class again, I know you and I have had this conversation of we're trying to get kids across the stage without encumbering them with additional courses, and I'm, respectful of that perspective. If the administration has a recommendation, like off the top of my head, I would assume like next year's freshman class, it might be easy to require and then scale up right after year versus telling every senior that shows up at San Marcos High School this upcoming academic year, like, hey, you need to fit a health class in there. So I'm just curious if you were directed to institute a health requirement, what that would look like administratively.
It would be interesting,
with
to say the least,
Yeah.
because you're talking half credit, so that means you're gonna find another half credit. Talking 900 freshmen, so 20 per class, that's 40 sections, so that's.
It's also offered in 8th grade, so there's not a,
Correct.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we could also include it in 8th grade curriculum. Is that an option?
So like Dr. Salmi said, I think there's a variety of ways to institute or roll out the program. Ideally or individually, if that was something that the most painless way to do it. So I'm curious of that, if possible, just because I don't want to tell you when to implement it. Obviously, I'm not the professional. So I'm curious of that. And then the last thing that I had,
Do you all have any to add?
that's it. I just had questions about the current agenda.
That it?
Yep.
I had one more. So I think that the closed session item A is a request that I'd made, and unless there's some other reason to have that on there, I no longer need to have that item.
I have a question too. Also, for the health, I'd like to see what the proposed cost, the additional cost would be to implement that.
We
I
can get you a proposed cost.
Thank you.
Under which section?
For health,
For the health.
For the health
for
class.
proposed Health class.
yes.
Any other questions, Dr. Sami? Or Mr. Shanks?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so
No.
then we're good on our agenda?
We are, we just have the closed session items.
Trustee Redondo had a question.
Ms. Cantu, before we close this item, and I don't know if we can talk about it now, I know there's been a little bit of conversation about one of our colleagues their inability possibly to not attend the scheduled training on the 18th. Without saying names or whatever, I don't know if that's true or not, confirmed or pending. I was hoping we could have that conversation now of possibly finding alternative dates in the month of June, if applicable now. So if that were to occur, if one of our colleagues couldn't attend, and I don't know if it's the 18th, I'm making that date up, but whatever that date is,
It is the 18th.
if we can flesh out the 8 of us right now, possible dates. Individually, I would like to have it sooner rather than later, especially with Mr. Shanks coming on board and just the amount of in-service that occurs during the summer. If for whatever reason this board modifies core commitments or kind of the direction of where we want to send the school district, obviously I want Mr. Shanks to have that opportunity to have that say with the 7 of us sooner rather than later, because if staff goes through the entire year or its entire summer of in-service, and then in August or September, we say, hey, we want to change a core commitment, then
Yes.
it really doesn't, the rubber doesn't meet the road for another year. So anyway,
So could we consider the following Saturday as an alternate would that work with everybody, in case that we can't get full quorum for the 18th,
You mean after,
the following Saturday?
after the 18th?
Yes,
The following
so it'd be
Saturday
the
after
25th,
18th.
June
25th, right.
25th.
I can do that.
I can do the 25th.
I can do the 25th.
I can do that.
Wait, are we sure that we can't do the 18th? Sorry, my schedule is extremely complicated, so I need to just understand.
Are
Are we not available on the 18th?
Dr. Sami, we have one board member that may have to be out because of family illness. And,
Okay, so the 25th is what you're talking about now.
right. Can y'all check your calendars, Mr.
I'm
Shanks?
trying. I have a few. Just a second.
Everybody down here can, right? You're not sure yet?
I feel like I have no choice. So, I mean, everyone agrees. So, I mean, I'll make it work.
Well, right now it's I guess my perspective on this is it's either or, right? Like right now, all of us have blocked out the 18th. So if something were to occur for the 18th, Plan B would be the 25th.
Alternate would be the 25th.
Okay.
But
And
if you
Yeah.
don't think you can do either of them, then we can look at,
another date, yeah.
Yeah,
If
the
25th
25th,
becomes a
I
problem,
can do
you
the
guys-
25th as well.
Will our trainer be available, you think?
We'd have to check.
we don't know
To
yet.
get with
but-
him tomorrow.
When will we know?
I'll try to have a response for y'all tomorrow.
Thank you.
I'm for the 25th also.
Are you, Mr. Shanks, did you said you are okay on the 25th?
Yes, ma'am.
For
I'm
the
free on the 25th.
Okay. But right now, you're able on the 18th?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good deal. So that's a conversation we needed to have?
Yeah,
Anything
thank you, Ms.
else?
Cantu.
You're welcome. Anything else before we take a quick little break and transition into the academic workshop?
He's ready to go.
We gonna come back at 55 or?
He's ready to go.
I need a break because some people didn't get it up.
Yeah.
So give me about
8?
3 minutes.
Oh, I don't wanna rush you.
You don't want to rush me? Okay, good. Good, so I can walk through. You walk with me? But I need you on the bus. go get into our academic workshop now.
Try to think what the SCA is, like certified with
Freezing.
right now. They don't have anybody good now. Be easier. I don't know that I trust any coach.
I would trust her. I told her she would do big boys everything.
She's strong.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam President, Board of Trustees, Cardona. Thank you for the opportunity for our academic team to be here to present information to you all on the work that we are preparing to, much of the work I'm saying, preparing, but we're already doing things in the school year. Okay, all right. Thank you for the opportunity to share the work that we are doing in support of our students, our teachers, and the principals in our wonderful district. So, when you look at the Office of Academics, there are several departments that make up our wonderful team. And here's the thing to keep in mind as you look and see 9 departments listed. Although there are 9 departments listed, in some cases there might only be one person who actually makes up the work of that department. Some of the departments are larger than others. I'll just go through a couple of them. Campus leadership, that is the department that supports our principals. That's the one-to-one coaching that happens and day-to-day supervision for principals. Curriculum and innovative instruction, that is the department that's responsible for ensuring that we are we're teaching the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge of Skills, and investing and making sure that we have high quality instructional materials. I won't go through each one of them, but I have all of the team here today who oversees those departments, and they're able to answer any questions that you may have as it relates to the specific actions that they lead within those departments. So in the world of academics, we like to think about things in terms of a hypothesis that will explain if we implement a set of strategies, what will happen as a result of that. So if you look at that theory of action, there's a couple of key words that are bolded. Aligned curriculum, high quality, culturally relevant instructional materials, job-embedded professional development, and student achievement. So when we look at aligned curriculum, it's important that we have a coordinated effort that the state standards, the TEKS, are aligned with the instructional materials and teaching techniques and the academic assessments. So if, for example, the TEK called for our students to compose a narrative, and if you're in the classroom, you would expect to see that verb compose. That's what our students are actually doing. If the students are not composing something, but they're answering a multiple choice item, then there's a misalignment between the standard and what's happening in the classroom. By the same token, we also want to emphasize that there are tons of teaching strategies, and so we expect that in our classrooms, we're not seeing a full-blown lecture in every classroom. We're not saying that there's not a place for it, but if that's our only form of instructional technique, then we want to make sure that we're using things such as small group station, the station model, and that kind of thing. And the same thing with assessments. The assessments have to align to what is being taught in the classroom. The high-quality instructional materials, that is something that we've taken on as an emphasis this year. We've adopted a new literacy curriculum that we're very proud of, Amplify, that we will be using this coming year in our elementary schools. The job-embedded professional development is simply, we know that our teachers, our administrators, all of us need professional development. At the same time, we realize that the best time to offer professional development isn't after teachers have worked a full day, nor on the weekend. So the job embedded piece is what happens during the normal course of your workday. We have instructional coaches at every campus. We have district curriculum specialists, and it is their job, along with the administrators, to provide that coaching and support during the actual work day so that our teachers and administrators benefit from professional development without not adding to having to spend time away from their families and such in the evenings and on the weekends. So this is the expectation that you're seeing this throughout the day. So again, if we focus on the aligned curriculum, the high quality, culturally relevant instructional materials, the job embedded professional development, we will see increased levels of student achievement across all content areas. And so that is internally, it's our theory of action for academics. So in San Marcos CISD, we have a framework that is called the Effective Schools Framework, and this is built around what Texas has determined as a way to provide a clear vision for what districts and schools across the state do to ensure excellent education. So there's a couple of things, and I'll go into detail with each one of them, but there are 5 levers to look at. The first is strong school leadership and planning, strategic staffing, positive culture, high-quality instructional materials and assessment, and effective instruction. And so in order to make our schools work effectively, all of these 5 pieces have to work together to achieve that. The first lever is strong school leadership and planning. So this is where we would like to think of the campus leadership, our principals, our assistant principals, teacher leaders. And one of the things that we emphasize with this is the clear roles and responsibilities. It is paramount that all campuses have expectations of who is doing what so that we don't have cracks in the system where someone can say, well, someone responsible for this, but no one's doing it. So that's one of the first things that is a piece of this, is the clear roles and responsibilities. Instructional leadership is a big part of this, and that's where principals and assistant principals are working with teachers, observing and providing teachers with feedback. It's their being in the classroom, spending that time to talk to students, to talk to teachers. The human capital management is also a big part of the development, and the big focus there is on recruiting and retaining teachers. As a district, of course, we serve to support that mission, but it's so important that the principal is the one leading that, because that's who the teachers are working with on a daily basis. And then the organization leadership is really about setting the school mission, the school climate, and the culture, and deploying the resources aligned with the strategic goals. So in our case, House Bill 3 is one of the things that we use as a gauge to see how we're doing in terms of third grade math, third grade reading, CCMR. Those are all things that we use in determining where we are in terms of the organizational leadership. Our principals have monthly principals meeting where they have an opportunity to work and collaborate with each other, so they are able to share some of the challenges and many of the successes that they experience. So this is an ongoing monthly meeting. In addition to that, they also benefit from individual coaching. Next year, all principals will engage in an equity and excellence audit project, and this is through our work with INCUST, and that will be something where every school has different equity needs, but it varies from campus to campus, so this will allow the principal to use their problem of practice to address an equity challenge that they may be facing that's different from what their peers are experiencing. The strategic staffing part is, first and foremost, it is crucial that we have a highly effective principal on every campus and that we have highly effective teachers in every classroom. So those are the 2 important pieces when we look at what makes the school effective. If we don't have either a highly effective principal or highly effective teachers in the classroom, we know that our students will not benefit from a high level of learning. We've already talked about the job-embedded professional development. The equitable hiring practices is something that the district created a couple years ago. And what this emphasizes is the need to be able to address diversity, equity, and inclusion during the hiring process. So it is a very scenario-based interview. And during that interview, again, all the applicants are asked questions that gets to the heart of their intentions about how to ensure that our schools are equitable, knowing that we do have a diverse student population. HR and academics works very closely together. One of the things that we do annually is we have a fall and spring staff review, and this is a time when all principals are able to come in for us to gather a complete picture of their teachers. We're looking at the impact of teachers and their on student performance, and it's really more about identifying teacher strengths than looking at weaknesses. We want to have a system here where we're building teacher leaders Also during this meeting, principals are asked about irreplaceables. That's something that came out years ago. The New Teacher Project focused on who are your teachers that they must stay on your campus in order for you to continue to achieve the results that you're getting. So our principals are encouraged. We did this last year around December, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe November, where they were charged with having stay conversations with their best teachers to ensure that those teachers would return to their campus, because we know around the holidays is when people who are looking to leave, they really do start that process of looking. So stay conversations is a natural part of the staff review process that happens every year. Positive school culture. So our goal is for every staff member in our schools and district offices to make it their job that when every student, family, and visitor comes in, they feel noticed, welcomed, and valued. One of the things that we have emphasized this year and continuing on to next year is getting back to some old-fashioned values, as I like to call them. It's greeting people when they enter the room. It's the please, the thank you. Some of those old-fashioned things that many of us may have grown up doing, but that's one of the things that we are emphasizing as we look to change the culture across our district. We are working closely with the Office of Communications to create some strategic marketing plans for each of our campuses so that we can identify the niche for their particular campuses. If you look at Mendez, for example, I'll just use them. They're a dual language campus, so the needs of Mendez would be different from the needs of Travis. So how do we market that campus in a way to speak to what that campus has to offer that is unique? So it's really moving beyond just the advertising, but to the marketing and management of the school. And the way to do that is by, of course, embracing and celebrating the school culture. Creating systems to track the school culture is something that we will be able to do. We have purchased Decision Ed, which is a data management system that previously we did not have in the district. It was unfortunate that to use the data, we had a lot of systems and our teachers and principals were having to pull from a lot of different places. So now they'll have all the data in one place. It'll be easily accessible for them. We will continue with the positive behavior intervention supports that we have in place. Some of you may have seen where our campuses celebrate when kids get a certain number of good referrals. If they're in attendance for a certain amount of days over the 9 weeks. Those are things that we want to celebrate. We know that we have some challenges when it sometimes comes to discipline, but we also don't want to lose the sight of the number of students who are doing the right thing each and every day. We have to celebrate those students. And so PBIS, as it's called, is something that we will be moving full steam ahead with every school in the district next year, from Bonham Pre-K to San Marcos High School. Okay, so high quality instructional materials, and I talked about this just a little bit earlier, but one of the things that we realized this year, San Marcos, like a lot of districts across the state and across the country, found itself using a reading program that was not deemed high quality instructional material, Fontes and Pinnell, F&P. It does not align to the science of reading. So you're seeing districts all across the country move away from that, and we are one of the districts who are moving away from it. The goal of having high quality instructional materials, first and foremost, is to give every student access. Whether the student is an emergent bilingual, whether the student is receiving special education services, we have to ensure that all students in San Marcos are receiving that high quality instructional materials. Legally, we have to teach TEKS on grade level. We cannot go off grade level unless there's a modification in place through the ART process. Otherwise, we are charged to implement grade level TEKS. And so the resources that we use, they must be aligned, they must be content rich, meaning that you're going to see a lot of nonfiction take place, and that's an area we know our students need more exposure, is to be able to read about significant events throughout history and science that will grow them as readers. Complex text is the way that we're going to have to move our district to see our kids to keep doing better in reading. Science of reading, you've probably heard a lot of talk about that. And what the science of reading is, it's really just It boils down to the basic of teaching phonics, making sure that our kids are getting that daily dose of phonics. With our previous reading adoption, phonics, we did not have a phonics program. So teachers were again having to pull from different places. Amplify phonics is included in that. The beautiful thing about Amplify also is that our teachers will not have to spend hours and hours doing lesson plan. It is pretty scripted for them. Of course, teachers will be required to spend time going over how to teach it, but they're not going to be searching for things, so it will be a lot less time on them having to plan those lessons every week. So we look at the pyramid for effective instruction. 4 key things come to mind: effective classroom routines and instructional strategies. First and foremost, it is important that the teacher is able to communicate content clearly and accurately. We can't have a situation where we're giving kids wrong information. Teachers are checking for understanding daily, and they do this honestly every 5 to 10 minutes in some cases. We know that it's not enough to wait until the end of the lesson to check for student understanding, because you've missed 45 to 60 minutes of kids sitting there and not necessarily getting the right information. So our teachers do a terrific job with that. Maximizing instructional time, having students actively participate, so we don't want to see our students just being bystanders when it comes to the lesson. We want to see them manipulating. We want to see them debating. We want to see them defending their ideas. We want to see them doing a lot of the talking. So if you walk in one of our classrooms, you may hear talking and assume that, wait a minute, are the kids on task? But we actually want to see that debate, and so kids are able to defend their points of view using different texts. The observation and feedback, which is number 2, are designed to develop teachers, not just evaluate. So what we're doing with our principals, we're moving away from the thought that observations are only for the purpose of evaluations. Observations are for growing our teachers. So if you look at our T-test, it is on a continuum, meaning that we want to see over time our teachers continuing to grow, from whether it's from developing to proficient, but that continuum is something that we want to emphasize versus a one and done type of evaluation where an administrator comes to your room for 45 minutes and you see them one time a year. We want this to be a repeated process. 3, data-driven instruction, making sure that we're using a lot of different assessment data. And the thing I want to point out here is when I say assessment data, it's not necessarily standardized testing alone. We do know that we have a purpose for standardized tests, but we also know that the anecdotal data that is collected day to day from teachers is in some cases more significant than how a student performs on one test. So teachers being able to speak to how students are progressing each and every day is the data that we want to use that will allow us to refine their annual learning goals and be able to track the data to see if students are making progress. We should know, and based on what I saw this past year, our teachers and our principals, they know how kids are performing. I don't think we saw any surprises when it came to our STAR data, the results. I think we were right on with the things that we saw all year in terms of the formative assessments that were given. So that's something that we'll continue to do. And last is the multi-tiered system for supports, which is labeled as MTSS. What that starts with is Tier 1 instruction. We have to get Tier 1 instruction right. We cannot operate in a system where intervention is our go-to. So if we don't get the tier instruction right, we're going to find ourselves with an inverted pyramid where all the kids are getting Tier 2 and Tier 3 and not the Tier 1 instruction. Our PLCs, we are moving away, the professional learning communities, we're moving away from coming to the meeting and talking about what are we teaching this week to teachers actually getting up and modeling how they're going to teach different things. That way, if I'm a brand new teacher and I've never had the experience of teaching, I can see my peers who are more experienced, they can actually demonstrate for me, this is how you teach this concept in a classroom. And a couple things on the horizon. One major thing is the K-12 Strategic Literacy Plan. We are engaged in work with TNTP, formerly known as the New Teacher Project, and they will be helping us develop a K-12 literacy plan, and actually that's more of a pre-K through 12 literacy plan. And we are fortunate to be able to work with them because if we did not have the funding from our T-Class grant, we would be paying upwards of $200,000 for the services they provide. They will be facilitating stakeholder meetings across the community, meeting with parents, meeting with students, meeting with staff, and they will help us develop this plan so that when the question is asked, what is the vision for literacy in San Marcos, we all speak a common language. So that's something that actually will start work. It's June now, in June this month, with the first round of getting that work going. I will come back and present updates as we continue to progress. It will take about a year to get the plan off the ground. They've done work with Alding ISD. They have a very robust literacy plan, and many of the districts are actually sent to Alden to look at their plan. We had the opportunity to work with them, and so you'll see elements of that sprinkled in as we introduce our new resources as well. Then the last thing, we haven't settled on a name for it yet. So we're going back and forth, but I'll read it as it is. It's the Graduate Initiative. So what the Graduate Initiative states is that the students, the class of 2026, when they leave San Marcos CISD and they graduate, they will have their diploma. But we know that in the competitive job market now, that is not enough to truly be successful. So there are a list of endorsements, whether it's a completion of a certain number of college courses, but there's a list of about 10 things that we're going to be rolling out that the expectation is that all of our graduates have the diploma plus one of these things. And it's industry-based certifications, but it's a way that we can really ensure that when they hit the job market, that they have on their resume or their applications, they can speak to that they've had some hands-on training. If they're going into the military, that's also something that would count. But it's a way to really drive home the point of we know a diploma is important, but we also know in order to be truly successful, you're going to need something other than that in today's market. And that is the update that I had for the academics workshop. So I welcome questions at this time.
Ms. Halsey?
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I'm particularly interested in the Graduate Plus initiative. And when you have those 10 criteria, would you be able to share those with the board?
Absolutely.
Super. And my other request would be, I think it's really important that we are inclusive and ensure that the among those markers, as you mentioned, are indicators for the military, for career initiatives that are tied to industries in our region. But I want to make sure that we're also not overlooking academic achievement, and so that there are indicators therein that are suitable for students going on to higher education in a traditional four-year setting.
Yes, ma'am.
And with the expectation that it's highly competitive.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. Sami, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. So two things. You mentioned the acronym PBIS, and I would like to know what that means.
Academic.
Oh, the PBIs, I'm sorry, the Positive Behavior Intervention System. So
Okay.
supports, and what it is a tiered approach to, just like we would do with classroom instruction, where we start off with everyone getting the foundational level. The positive behavior intervention supports would look like in a classroom. There is a set of classroom rules, procedures that everyone adheres to, but we know that students who may need additional support, they would then have tier 2 and tier 3 support. One of the big things with PBIS is also to recognize when students are performing, we want to have that positive reinforcement. So that's something that we want to make sure that we're including as part of PBIS. It emphasizes the positive behavior aspect.
Thank you. If someone else has something, you can come back to me, or I can go on.
I didn't hear.
Okay, so my other comment was around lesson plans, and I think I understand the value in having prepared lesson plans through the various curriculum resources that we have as a district. However, teachers are trained and some of them very skilled at developing lesson plans. And this is something that our teachers, many of our teachers know how to do and do well. So I wanted to just speak to how, if we are taking away something by not including our teachers in the development of lesson plans, or are we allowing teachers to, how does that deviation from the specific script, are we creating, a plug and play system where anyone, I just don't think that's what teaching is. So how are we addressing that within these sort of curricula that we have that provide lesson plans?
So what we're doing is we're not going to limit the teacher's ability to put their creative spin on the lessons, but this serves as a baseline for what must happen during the course of the lesson. So when teachers come together, there's already information that has been prepared for them. We certainly don't want our teachers to be robots. We want them to be able to utilize their personalities when it comes to teaching. So while there are prepared scripted lessons, teachers will still be encouraged when they're sitting down and they're going through the process to tweak the lessons that will benefit the students that they're serving. Because in any one classroom, you're going to have students who are at different levels, and so you'll need to take that into account. What also will happen is, even with a prepared lesson plan, the expectation is not that on Monday, I go in the classroom and that's my first time looking at the lesson plan. The expectation is still teachers will come together and they'll have those collaborative sessions to talk about what's in the plans and what do we need to adapt and modify for the students we're serving. And so the data will be the piece that will drive that.
Thank you.
Mr. Arredondo, did you have a question?
Yeah, Mr. Sanders, thank you so much for this presentation. I had a question about the positive behavior system. Is that, I'm assuming when we refer to like a kid, I guess what would be defined as misbehaving in class or acting up, that we don't immediately send them to the principal's office or to rebound or something like that, right? That we're not punitively punishing kids. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, sir, somewhat. We still will enforce the code of conduct. Mm-hmm. So if a student is in violation of one of the policies, we still will use that as to determine what the consequence will be. But at the same time, I like to think of it on the opposite end. It's that 90 to 95% of students who they're doing the right thing consistently, making sure that we're recognizing those efforts and reinforcing that positive behavior in the hope that that will be the behavior that spreads to all of our students. But we will definitely ensure that in our classrooms, if students are not able to adhere to policy and procedures, that we still do have the ability to act in accordance to what is in the student code of conduct.
Yeah, absolutely, and I apologize if my comment might have been misinterpreted. I guess my concern isn't that we're not sending kids who are misbehaving to the principal's office or to rebound, but just talking to a few classroom teachers who've expressed their concerns, and their comments in no way, shape, or form are in alignment with my personal belief system, but their comments were, we're not sending kids to rebound anymore, right, who are acting up or who are, disruptions to the classroom learning environment. And it was my understanding that we were being very intentional about not being so punitive, because a lot of times when there's a certain type of kid who acts up and misbehaves, right, and there's a certain kind of kid historically who would end up at rebound, and we were trying to break that cycle of sending those kids who act like that to that campus, etc. And I guess my concern or my comment as you go into the summer months and start doing in-service with your employees and our district staff is reiterating why the default is not just we send them away, and how historically that's been Black and brown kids who've been sent away for acting up. And again, just reiterating why we're doing the things that we're doing and why we're not just being so arbitrary about sending kids who misbehave to rebound is, I would appreciate that, because I think not all of the staff have gotten the message of why we have embraced kind of the restorative justice model and all the things, right? So that's the only comment that I have in regards to academics. I think at least anecdotally, there have been some concerns about one campus in particular, about like not sending the bad kids away, right? And I think there's a disconnect between why the administration and administrators are doing a certain something. So if you can just work on communicating that with classroom teachers, I'd really appreciate that.
Yes, sir, will do.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Oh, Mr. Saunders?
No.
Oh, I mean,
Shanks.
Shanks.
Miss-
Mr. Shanks, did you have a question?
I did, yes, ma'am. You mentioned at the very beginning about using surveys from parents to help make decisions. I'm curious as to what the participation rate in their district is for the surveys, and then what is the follow-up action after you get the surveys back and the survey closes? You know, I know I've seen several emails come across with surveys, and I'm just curious, what is the participation rate and what is the action afterwards?
So I'm understanding this is in regards to the K-12 literacy plan?
And for, yeah, at the very beginning, you talked about getting parents involved and engaged and using surveys.
So with the K-12 literacy plan, the way that it typically works is with a strategic plan of this nature. It's a huge undertaking that the company will come in and they will set up focus groups. In the focus groups, they'll meet with different groups of stakeholders to get ideas from them. We have not, at this point, initiated any surveys to get data from any community members regarding our literacy plan. What we do know is, in full transparency, if you ask 12 individuals what our literacy plan is in San Marcos CISD, you might get 12 different answers, but we have not done a formal survey yet, so that's something that the superintendent has charged us with coming up with that plan, and we are starting this month with TNTP. So I will be able to give you those results after we start later this month.
Roger, thank you.
I think Trustee Shanks, I can also say that, you know, in my time on the board, I've seen the district use surveys for a number of different reasons, and I think that the response rate really varies widely dependent on the topic and the timeliness and the urgency. When we did surveys around masking and around safety protocols with COVID, we received a much higher response rate than we had when we did previous surveys around other issues in other years. So I think it really varies, and I think that the response also of what I've seen, the way that the action that's used by the district is really specific to the intent of the survey. So if it's a survey about, you know, when is the best time for a community to receive home visits or to have a visit from the lunch bus or from various community initiatives, those are very different intentions versus, you know, a survey that is more generally speaking about what are some of the goals, broad, long range, and in this case, you know, sort of what is a theoretical idea, right, that is going to have to be narrowed down and discussed and defined, and there's a process there. And in other cases, we've used that bubble. I'm sure Mr. Fernandez can tell me what it's called, but those thought bubble conversations that have been used in a variety of situations where they've tried to find, like, what are the commonalities here, what are the language, what is the topics that keep coming up, and then so what action is really being directed to the district based on that process, so that it's not really going in with the intent necessarily of already having the result determined.
I would say, Trustee Shanks, on general, it's been, and Mr. Fernandez can correct me, it's generally about a 20 to 30% response rate on surveys generally, but I would agree with Trustee Halsey that some of the hot button items have gotten up where it's about, 40%. And it depends by level.
Definitely, and like Ms. Halsey mentioned with the mask mandate, I think we had an 80% return rate on that question. So it just depends on the magnitude of the question, what our community sees as important. When COVID hit and we asked about remote learning, we had about a 70 to 80% return rate on response as well. If we're asking just about different programming, like Dr. Cardona mentioned, it's about a 25 to 30% return rate. So it's really just what we get to see what is important to our community when we send out the surveys.
Thank you.
Redondo?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu, and Mr. Sanders. I promise this will be my last question, I think. Forgive my ignorance on the topic, but when we talk about like a literacy plan, I guess I don't understand, like, isn't it that all of our students should be literate, right? Like that's the plan, right? Like they can read on grade level through the system? Or like, is it, obviously it's more than that, right? We're talking about community conversations and goals, and so I guess, what does that mean?
So you're absolutely right with the goal at the end, of course, is all our kids are literate, right? But how we get there is something that right now varies from campus to campus, and there are different, of course, philosophies and beliefs as to how that looks. But what we've got to do is come together as a school system. We know that many of our kids will encounter more than one elementary school during their years. And so with that, we've got to ensure that the teaching practices that are embraced at one campus, it mirrors that at another campus, right? So as we think about our literacy plan, one of the things that we're moving away from is the balanced literacy approach, which was very popular for years and years and years. So what we will be doing is defining the high impact strategies for teaching reading that will make a difference. I'll give you an example of something that hopefully we don't see in our classrooms anymore, is popcorn reading, where as a teacher, I call on you, then I'm gonna call on you, then I'm gonna call on you. So it's those kind of outdated practices that we're trying to move away from, but we need to actually spell it out so that everyone can embrace and buy into what it looks like. And our instructional coaches can then support our teachers with that. Also, a big part of the literacy plan will be the instructional coaching model. What we have right now is we're going to be adopting a new instructional coaching model this year that will be part of our literacy plan, and it takes some of the best practices from Jim Knight, from Diane Sweeney, from Eleni Aguilar, and combines it into one system. The instructional coaches will then be able to coach teachers in a consistent manner across all the schools. So those are some of the things that you'll see in the literacy plan. It will emphasize the instructional strategies, but it'll also emphasize some of the techniques that should be used along with the professional development that our instructional coaches can offer. And just one additional thing, then I'll be quiet, I promise. We are very fortunate to have 4 new literacy coaches at the elementary level that were provided part of the T-Class grant, and they will be working with our teachers in support of implementing Amplify this year. One of the things that our teachers have told us loud and clear, they do not want us to dump a curriculum on them without having the proper training to be able to implement it. So these 4 elementary literacy coaches, that's going to be their full-time responsibilities, is supporting teachers as we implement this new reading curriculum. So all of those pieces would be included in the K-12 literacy plan.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. It's obvious you're passionate about this, and it's good to see that, you know, you have obviously taken ownership of this, so it'll be exciting to see this bear fruit in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions? Thank you, Mr.
I
Sanders.
I had one more.
Oh.
Sorry.
Dr. Salmi has a question.
Yeah, I do. So I know we have a lot of various curriculum, particularly sort of online learning options and all of the personalized learning methodologies that our students have. I recall hearing something about an audit of those various programs that we use. Is that something, did I misunderstand, or is there a plan in place to audit those various software programs that we've purchased and ensure that we're actually, you know, not, that we are in fact purchasing? Is that part of this plan, that we're purchasing the correct curriculum and that we're covering the bases we need to cover and not double dipping?
So earlier this year, we did conduct an internal audit of all the software that we were using in the district to determine if we were seeing a return on investment as far as the amount of money that we're spending versus the usage and the impact on student achievement. So what we did see were there were a couple of programs that We saw where we were paying a pretty substantial amount each year, and we were not seeing usage. And of course, if you're not seeing usage, the odds are that you're not seeing student progress or student achievement with those as well. So we did go through and look at every type of software that we have in the district to determine are we seeing that return on investment. And that will be something that we continually will do is to evaluate all of our instructional programs to ensure that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck when it comes to the amount of money that's being allocated for those resources to make sure that students are learning and that they're being used.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders.
Yes, ma'am.
So maybe now we're through. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Board. On the dais, Denise and I, we provided 3 sheets that we wanted to briefly discuss and notify. So that way, as we prepare for June 20th, we have a budget that we can bring forward to the Board.
Can we email these to?
And they have been emailed to the board members who are on Zoom. Andrew and Georgianne, I think, have emailed those sheets to you. So the first one to look at, it's the one with the yellow bar. This is proposed session 1. This has a yellow and a red bar. This is our proposed budget that we'll bring forth on June 20th. You can see that in addition to this, you'll see this contains the proposed salary increases that were addressed in May, the 3% and the 5.26% for classified. You can see the breakdown of our local revenue that we expect and project to bring in, totaling a little over $82 million. Then you can see our expenditures, how they're based out. You can see that salary comes out to a little over $73.7 million. And then campus and department allocations equaling a little over $15 million for a total expenditure of $88.8 million. You can see then that 6.7 deficit is a deficit. Then you look down a little bit further, you can see how that deficit breaks out. A continued deficit of the line item for central office, knowing that we budget for it, but as that building is built, it will probably not all be expended during next fiscal year, but we need to budget for it and address. Then you can see our supplementals and how they break out, $237,000. A quick overview of some of those supplementals contains AED machine upgrades, some addressing band pads, fine art equipment, things of that nature, updating our fingerprinting systems, time clock system, what have you. You can see that that will total out to a little over $13.9 million net change for fund balance. As you move forward, you can see that our ending fund balance proposed would be 35.6. You can then see our signed fund balance 3-month operating of 23.9, leaving us with an unassigned fund balance of a little over 11.7 million. The next sheet that you can see is the proposed budget. This is a little bit more in-depth view of what we just reviewed, broken down into function codes. Commonly, it's where's the money going. When you look at your functions, you can see our revenues, how they match back to the other sheet, equaling that 82 million for revenue. Our expenditures broken out. Function 11 is all instruction. You can see then curricular staff development, function 13, other functionalities there. You can see function 11, that's the construction project. That is our central office project as well. Totaling out at that 95.9 million. And again, similar figures, the same figures that we just addressed. And then last but not least, I wanted to provide an overview of what we will post in the daily record. The last sheet is this. Breaks out, it's the notification of our public meeting to discuss our budget and our proposed tax rates. I wanted to provide you some numbers in terms of what our M&O tax rate and our INS tax rate, what we plan to propose in June. One thing that I wanted to showcase is that our proposed tax rate, where did I go? There it is. Our proposed tax rate for next year is going to be, M&O side would be 0.9016, and then we're looking to propose an INS tax rate of 0.219489, totaling out to be 1.121089, which is lower than current year rate. We wanted to bring this to your awareness, so that way if you have any questions or discussion, Denise and I and our finance team can ensure that we have a budget buttoned up and ready for you guys on June 20th.
Questions, anybody?
I would like to know what the projected income would be if we did not change the tax rate rather than lowering it. I think that would be valuable information for us to have, and how that changes our deficit.
Okay, so that's a good question. So when you look at our M&O tax rate and our INS tax rate, we're using the lowest possible M&O tax rate that we can, based on the information that we provide through our property value surveys and what TEA provides us. Our INS rate has been lowered because that's meeting our bond debt. So that INS tax rate that you see is the minimum tax rate that we can put forward to ensure that we're paying our bond debt on the INS side.
Any other questions? Mr. Doyle, good job.
I do have one more question. Sorry, Mr. Doyle, you already moved. The unassigned fund balance, this may be something that you need to provide later because it's kind of a big question, but that would be the monies. When I look back at this, my first year on the school board, there were lots of expenditures that came up and caused budget amendments throughout this school year. Is there a way for you to sort of total those and give us an estimate of what that kind of expenditure has been over the past several years?
Yes,
So-
ma'am, we can definitely provide that, and typically, and what an item that we provide at board meetings, you'll see the change in terms of what's been amended to the budget, and that total is running. So yeah, we definitely provide that information for you.
Yeah, over the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, just so that as a board, we can understand that we are decreasing that fund balance and that we can't continue to approve expenditures, indefinitely.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu, and I apologize, Mr. Doyle. I needed to get my bearings straight over here before I needed to ask this. So can you explain to me why we are lowering the INS rate, or why it's proposed to lower the INS rate?
Good question. So as our property values have increased, our tax rates can then be lowered, right? And again, INS, we're wanting to propose a rate to cover our bond debt and not exceed that.
So, and I understand that last year, I believe it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, if you would ask like Joe and Jane Citizen, if the ISD's lowered our tax rate over the last 5 years, I think most lay people would say no, or I don't know, or my taxes have gone up, and taxes are too high, right? In actuality, this board, contrary to staff recommendation, lowered our taxes. I think it was like 15 cents. The last time we had this conversation, it was a significant decrease in taxes. So individually, I'm curious if we were to maintain the INS rate of 0.269182, would that just be reflected as we would increase the payments to our bond indebtedness and we would pay off our debt faster, arguably paying less in interest because we were paying it down faster?
Right, that would be that cash defeasance, paying our bond debt quicker, if you will. And yes, you would be paying that bond debt down quicker than at the rate that it's set.
So is that something that we can consider at that time, at this future meeting, or if this is published in the newspaper, it kind of ties our hands into what we can do?
We want to publish this in the newspaper to meet the letter of the law. We have to publish no later than 7 days. If we wanted to do a defeasance, we could bring that information forward. We'd need to know it pretty quickly. So that way we could publish that rate that we want to set in order to maintain the timeline and in order to pass our budget in June.
Yeah, and I totally understand that there are some statutory requirements of posting this, but again, individually, I don't know where my colleagues are. I know this board has been pretty intentional about paying our debt down early and, discussing and approving those cash defeasances. And so I'm interested in continuing that practice, but I don't know where everyone else is. So I'm interested in maintaining the INS rate at 269,182, but I don't know where everyone else is.
I have a
I
question.
think our bond counsel usually brings us a recommendation when the markets are good, I think, whatever it is that they look at. So maybe we just ask, but
And we can
works.
reach out to Mr. Tijerina and get his feedback on that maneuver and if it's a good time to do that.
Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, so on that same area of questioning on the comparison of proposed rates with last year's rates at the M&O, last year was 0.9016, and then there's the second item that says rate to maintain same level of maintenance and operations, which is 0.921958. Why is that not the recommendation?
Great question. So we will actually certify in August that M&O rate. And we're looking at it to be a lower than the proposal rate, but we don't know yet because property taxes are still being disputed, if you will, at our CADs, right? So we have to go with the M&O rate that we have set now. That's what we're going to propose, knowing that in August, once our values are certified, we can then certify our M&O rate.
So the M&O rate that we pass in August might be different than the M&O rate that we discuss in June.
Correct. We look for it to be lower, in fact, in August. And that's been the typical case, that we propose the current year M&O rate and expect and hope that in August, when all values are certified, we're able to see that M&O rate come down.
Right, but the number that I'm talking about is higher than the number that's proposed. The second number, the rate to maintain, is the question I have.
The 0.9219?
Yes.
number?
Why is that rate not the proposed rate, if that's the rate that we need to maintain to bring in a balanced budget?
That's, I'll do some digging on that.
I think that's on not the certified values, because we won't get certified values until August. And so they're basing that number on what they have right now. And in order to maintain what we're wanting to keep, their proposed, well, they have that maintenance they have that level at that point. And then they're saying our proposed rate after all the certified values come in should be, we can keep it at the same amount that we had last year.
But we've just shown that we can't because we'll have a budget deficit.
That was and then you start moving into.
So could we actually propose the 0.921958 rate?
Yeah.
Because if that was, I mean, that's, if,
The other thing is that whatever we do, we can always go lower in August, but we can't go higher without coming back.
Right.
right.
Dr. Sami and Mr. Shanks, did y'all hear that response?
No, not at all, and I'd really like
Or
to.
if you go to the mic so that they could also hear that. Thank you.
Okay, so we were looking at the the rate to maintain the level, which is the 0.92. So we were saying that has to do with the certified values, and those certified values will not come in until August. So we are going to check with our financial advisors tomorrow to see if we can keep or we can go ahead and propose the 0.92 at this time and see how that would affect our rate until the certified values actually come in. And then if they do come in and we can lower it or we can keep it the same, then we'll do that in August meeting. But we'll check on that and we'll get back with you on the 0.92 rate.
Okay, so can you explain where the number came from? Why, I mean, I think the question that Ms. Halsey asked was, why are we not suggesting that rate? And I'm still confused about that.
So looking at projections for next year, we can only go 6 pennies above the M&O rate, the compressed, maximum compressed rate. So I want to reach out and get a little bit more further understanding. But with that being said, we're looking at a rate that would actually be a little bit lower. And answer your question, how that number landed on this sheet, that's something that I want to reach out and get a better answer from our financial group, our management group, to be able to provide you a better answer on that.
So did I understand correctly that you just said that there will be a certified tax rate thing that happens in August and we can only go 6.06? What did you say about 6 cents above that?
We have to take the compressed tax rate that the state will provide us, and we can only go above that rate by 6 pennies. That's what we've adopted as a district. Any pennies above that, we would have to go out to a vote to the community to adopt either 2 more golden pennies or additional copper pennies.
And do we know the compressed rate?
We have the we have an estimate, but again, that's something that won't be really secured until August.
Okay.
So I don't want to provide anything right now because there's so many variables between June and August that could be really different.
Ms. Cantu.
Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu. Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I appreciate you bringing this to us now so that we can collectively workshop this and talk about these proposed maintenance and operation rates and the INS rate. And I understand that y'all are going to talk with Mr. Tiarina, bond counsel, financial advisors to bring back that information that my colleagues and I have requested. And more than anything, I think this is like the first time we've kind of had this workshop type discussion about these proposed rates and what the ISD's financial plans are long-term. So I just wanted to indicate that I appreciate us having this exercise this evening, and I look forward to having that feedback from bond counsel and the financial advisors so that we can collectively understand what these rates can be proposed as. And if possible, Ms. Garcia, Mr. Doyle, if you could also provide, as we have this conversation, a historical analysis of what our tax rate has been and where we've been and where we're going. Because again, I think historically we've been able to lower, the tax rate is significantly lower than when I was elected in 2015. So when we talk about holding INS or holding the maintenance and operation rate as is, arguably we have been decreasing taxes, and again in relation to that 15-cent decrease during the last conversation, again I think we're trending in a positive direction even if we were to hold the rates within standard.
I do have 2021 and 21-22 M&O and IS if you want that.
Oh, I don't need that tonight. I mean, yeah, that's fine.
Well, and the sheet says that the district can adopt before requiring a voter approval is an election of 1.121089, and we're already well below that. So, and I'm assuming that's based on that presumed compressed tax rate that'll happen in August, but not yet certified.
Correct.
But even if that became true, we would still have a little room to go up to that if we needed to. That would help to cover the deficit that we currently have because we decided to give teachers increases.
Right.
I'm thinking also that we have to also think about the more money that we receive, we will go into the recapture, and so we won't be able to, keep all that money. So that's another factor we have to think about as well.
So let's just,
Yeah.
can we just go over the timing one more time? So at the June meeting now, we're having a public hearing for the budget, and then we are voting on the budget. And we are also having a public hearing on the tax rate, but we are not scheduled to vote on the tax rate because we will be voting on the tax rate in the August meeting once we get the number from the state for the actual certified values and the compressed tax rate, right? So at what point does this document need to go into the paper?
We need to post that before we have our budget conversation.
When are we posting it next week?
It's going to be posted, we plan to post it on June 12th.
Even though we won't be actually voting on the tax rate until August?
Correct, because the budget is based off of those tax rates.
Okay, so we'll post this with the best information that we have as proposed, but that is not definitive because it could change both at the June meeting and then some parts of it could change again in August.
Correct.
And we also have reserved, just in case, the last Monday in June as an alternate school board meeting in case we're unable to get this all to the point that we need to have it done at the regular June meeting. So, because there's part of it that has to be done by the end of June, the budget.
The budget,
has to be
yeah.
approved by the 30th.
Right, even though we won't have the state compressed tax rate until August, which is
Yep.
what it is.
Sorry, it's very weird to be remote because I don't know if I'm interrupting someone. There's the discussion that I think one of you brought up about the recapture, and I think that's really important that we keep that in mind when we're talking about this tax rate and budget, because of course, I don't think any of us want our San Marcos tax dollars going to Westlake to fund those schools. So, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when we're discussing that, and something that, as we talk about, rather than going to the lower tax rate, I think we have to know that as well when you're making the plans and sending us additional information.
Mr. Redondo, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I guess my last comment, hopefully, is that if after the dialogue from my colleagues and I, and after your conversations with the financial advisors and bond counsel, if these numbers change, and obviously you're still going to post them in the newspaper, my request is that you just send us an updated version of this via Georgianne and Alicia. Okay, awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle, and thank you, both of you.
Thanks, Joe.
Good job. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hands. 7, opposed, 0. Thank you all very much. Staff, thank you so much for all that you brought to the table today. We appreciate it.